In the heart of the Masai Mara, where golden grasslands stretch endlessly beneath the African sun, a story unfolded that would challenge everything we know about loyalty, survival, and revenge in the animal kingdom. This is not just another tale of predator versus prey, but something far more sinister. A lioness named Nyota would become the architect of one of the most calculated acts of vengeance ever witnessed in the wild. Her story begins not with roars of triumph, but with the silence of betrayal. The year was 2019, and the Acacia Ridge Pride had ruled their territory for nearly a decade. 7 lionesses, bound by blood and forged by countless hunts, moved across their domain like shadows given form. At the heart of this sisterhood stood Nyota, her golden coat scarred by years of battles, her amber eyes carrying the wisdom of a seasoned hunter. She was not the largest of her sisters, nor the fastest, but she possessed something that made even the most dominant males step carefully around her. Intelligence burned behind those eyes like fire waiting to consume. For years, the pride had thrived under the protection of 2 massive coalition males, Django and Bakari. These brothers had claimed the territory through blood and fury, driving out weaker males and establishing an empire that stretched across 40 square kilometers of prime hunting grounds. The lionesses had accepted their rule, as was the way of the Savannah. In return for protection and the right to sire cubs, the males defended the borders and ensured the pride's survival. It was an ancient contract written in instinct and sealed with violence. Nyota had given birth to 3 cubs under this protection, 2 daughters and a son, each carrying her fierce spirit and cunning intellect. She watched them grow strong beneath the acacia trees, their playful pounces and mock battles preparing them for the harsh realities that lay ahead. The pride prospered during these golden years. Buffalo herds thundered through their territory in endless migrations, and the lionesses hunted with precision that bordered on artistry. Each kill was a symphony of coordination, each victory shared among sisters who trusted one another with their very lives. But the savannah is not a place of permanent peace. Beyond the borders of their territory, younger males prowled in the darkness, their hunger sharpening with each passing season. They had tasted defeat before, scattered by Django and Bakari in battles that left the grasslands stained with blood. Yet defeat had not broken them. Instead, it had taught them patience, cunning, and the bitter wisdom that comes from watching stronger lions feast while you starve in exile. The first signs of change came with the dry season of 2021. Water sources dwindled to muddy pools, and prey grew scarce as herds migrated toward distant rivers. The pride was forced to venture further from their core territory, sometimes crossing into disputed lands where the scent of rival lions lingered like a warning. During one such hunt, disaster struck in the form of a massive buffalo bull whose horns found their mark. Bakari fell that evening, his roars fading into the silence of death as his brother stood helpless beside the body. Django's grief transformed into rage, but rage without direction becomes destruction. He lashed out at the lionesses, driving them from kills they had earned through their own blood and sweat. His paranoia grew with each passing night, seeing enemies in every shadow, threats in every distant roar. The protective male who had once been their shield became their tormentor, and the lionesses began to understand that their golden age was ending. It was during this chaos that the exiled males struck, not with the fury of desperate challengers, but with the calculated precision of lions who had learned from their failures. They came at dawn, when the mist still clung to the grasslands and visibility was reduced to mere shadows. 4 males, lean but powerful, moved like ghosts through the territory that had once seemed impregnable. The battle that followed would be remembered in whispers for generations to come. Django fought with the desperation of a king facing his final hour, his roars echoing across the plains as he tried to rally the lionesses to his side. But something had changed in the pride's dynamics. Where once the females would have charged to his defense, now they hesitated. Some retreated to protect their cubs. Others simply watched as their protector faced overwhelming odds. Nyota stood at the center of this hesitation, her calculating gaze measuring not just the physical battle before her, but the political implications of every possible outcome. She had seen Django's decline, witnessed his transformation from protector to tyrant. The cubs hiding behind her legs were not just her offspring, but the future of the bloodline she had spent her life building. In that moment of choice, as roars and snarls filled the air, she made a decision that would define everything that followed. She did not charge to Django's aid. The new males, led by a scarred giant named Kessie, overwhelmed the aging protector through sheer numbers and youthful strength. Django's final roar was cut short by teeth that found his throat, and the ancient king fell in the dust of the territory he had ruled for 7 years. The lionesses watched in silence as their world collapsed, knowing that everything they had built was about to be torn apart. What followed was the darkest chapter in the pride's history. The new males moved through the territory like a plague, seeking out every cub that carried Django and Bakari's bloodline. This was not mere cruelty, but cold evolutionary logic. By eliminating the previous generation's offspring, they would force the lionesses into estrus sooner, ensuring that their own genes would dominate the pride's future. Nyota watched helplessly as her sister's cubs were dragged from their hiding places. The screams of mothers echoed across the grasslands as their children were torn apart before their eyes. Some lionesses fought desperately to protect their young, only to be driven off by males whose strength far exceeded their own. Others simply fled into the wilderness, choosing exile over witnessing the destruction of everything they loved. When Kessie and his coalition came for Nyota's cubs, she made her stand at the base of an ancient baobab tree. Her daughters cowered behind her, while her son, barely 6 months old, tried to roar his defiance through milk teeth. The confrontation lasted only minutes, but those minutes stretched like hours in Nyota's memory. She fought with the fury of a mother protecting her bloodline, her claws raking across Kessie's scarred face before superior strength overwhelmed her. As she lay bleeding in the dust, watching the new males carry away the bodies of her children, something died inside Nyota that would never be reborn. But something else was born in that moment, something cold and patient, and utterly without mercy. The lioness who rose from the dust was no longer the same creature who had fallen. She was transformed, forged by loss into an instrument of vengeance that would make the savannah tremble. The new males claimed their victory and began the process of establishing their dominance over the surviving lionesses. They marked the territory with their scent, drove off potential rivals, and settled into the rhythm of rulership. But they had made one crucial error in their calculations. They had allowed Nyota to live, and a lioness with nothing left to lose is perhaps the most dangerous predator on the African plains. In the weeks that followed, Nyota remained with the pride, accepting the new order with what appeared to be resignation. She mated when commanded, hunted when directed, and showed no outward signs of the storm building behind her amber eyes. The new males saw her compliance and believed they had broken her spirit. That grief had transformed the once proud lioness into a submissive shadow of her former self. They could not have been more wrong. Not have been more wrong. During the long nights when the pride slept beneath the stars, Nyota remained awake, her mind mapping every detail of her captors' routines. She studied their patrol patterns with the patience of a hunter learning her prey. Casey favored the eastern borders at dawn, while his second, a massive brute named Tao, preferred the rocky outcrops where shade lingered longest during the scorching afternoons. The third male, Gensi, was younger and more careless, often wandering alone when his arrogance outweighed his caution. The fourth, Bomani, carried an old injury that slowed his movements when the weather turned cold. Each weakness was cataloged, every vulnerability stored away like precious stones in a treasure vault. Nyota watched as the new males settled into complacency, their vigilance dulling as weeks passed without challenge. They had conquered their kingdom and now believed themselves untouchable. Pride, she realized, was their greatest weakness, and she would use it to destroy them all. The first phase of her plan required allies, but not the kind one might expect. Nyota began reaching out to creatures the pride had long ignored or dismissed. Hyenas who remembered the brutality of the takeover, wild dogs who had been driven from their territories by the expanding coalition. Even the old bull elephant, Tembo, who had watched his favorite watering hole become a killing ground. She communicated not through roars or scent marks, but through actions that spoke louder than words. When a clan of hyenas approached a fresh kill, Nyota would deliberately leave choice portions behind, her amber eyes meeting theirs across the blood-stained grass. When wild dogs needed passage through the territory, she would position herself between them and the patrolling males, creating windows of opportunity. These were not alliances built on friendship, but on mutual understanding of injustice. The Savannah had its own sense of justice, and Nyota was becoming its instrument. Her second phase involved the other lionesses, though here she had to tread more carefully. Some of her sisters had already begun bearing the new male's cubs, their maternal instincts overriding their grief. Others remained broken by their losses, hollow-eyed shadows who moved through the territory like ghosts. But a few still carried the fire of rebellion in their hearts, and these were the ones Nyota approached with whispered conversations during the hunt. Aquila, whose two cubs had been among the first killed, needed little convincing. The youngest lioness, Zuri, had lost her firstborn and still wept at night when she thought no one was listening. Django's former favorite, Dalila, had been cast aside by the new males, and now hunted alone at the edges of the pride. These three became Nyota's inner circle, bound together by shared trauma and a hunger for retribution that burned in their bellies like poison. The conspiracy grew slowly, carefully, like a fire that starts with a single ember and gradually consumes an entire forest. Each lioness recruited others, not through grand speeches or dramatic gestures, but through subtle reminders of what had been lost. A mention of a dead cub's name during a hunt. A pause at the spot where a favorite sleeping place had been violated. Small cuts that reopened old wounds and kept the anger fresh. By the time the rains returned to the Masai Mara, Nyota commanded a network of resentment that stretched far beyond the pride's borders. She had transformed from a grieving mother into something the males could never have anticipated. A general marshaling forces for a war they did not even know was coming. The opportunity she had been waiting for arrived with the migration season. Vast herds of wildebeest and zebra flooded across the plains, bringing with them the chaos and abundance that defined the Mara's annual spectacle. The new males, drunk on the easy hunting, began to spread themselves thin across the territory. Their patrols became irregular as they gorged themselves on the endless feast, their vigilance blunted by prosperity. It was during one of these migration hunts that Nyota struck her first blow. Bomani, the injured male, had separated from his brothers to claim a zebra kill for himself. Nyota approached him as she had countless times before, her posture submissive, her intent seemingly peaceful. But hidden in the tall grass behind her moved shadows that Bomani's arrogance prevented him from seeing. The attack came from three directions at once. Nyota's teeth found his throat while Akila and Zuri struck from the flanks, their claws raking across his hindquarters and belly. The old injury that had slowed him now became his doom as he struggled to turn and face his attackers. His roars of alarm echoed across the plains, but the distance and the thunder of migrating herds swallowed the sound before it could reach his coalition brothers. When Bomani's struggles finally ceased, Nyota stood over his body with blood dripping from her muzzle. But this was not the wild frenzy of a hunt, or the desperate violence of a mother protecting her young. This was something colder, more deliberate. She had not killed in anger, but in calculation, and the precision of her revenge sent a chill through even her own allies. The body was left where scavengers would find it, but arranged in a way that would send a message to those who understood the language of violence. Bomani's mane had been torn away, his face mutilated beyond recognition. To casual observers, it might have looked like the work of hyenas or wild dogs. But to the surviving males, the signature would be unmistakable. This was personal. Kessie's rage when he discovered the body was volcanic in its intensity. He roared challenges that shook the acacia trees and sent birds fleeing for miles around. But rage without a target becomes impotent fury, and Nyota had been careful to leave no obvious trail back to herself. She grieved with the other lionesses when the body was found, her performance of shock and sorrow so convincing that even some of her co-conspirators wondered if they had imagined her involvement. The remaining three males tightened their patrols and increased their vigilance, but they were looking for external threats, rival coalitions that might have invaded their territory, lone males seeking to claim a piece of their kingdom. They could not conceive that the danger came from within, from the very lionesses they believed they had subjugated. Nyota's second strike came 3 weeks later, targeting Yensi, the youngest and most arrogant of the coalition. She used his own pride against him, luring him away from his brothers with the promise of mating. The young male followed eagerly, his testosterone-addled brain overriding any instinct for caution. The ambush site Nyota had chosen was perfect, a narrow ravine where echoes would confuse and disorient, where escape routes were limited, and help could not arrive in time. This time she brought 5 lionesses with her, and their coordination was flawless. They struck like a pride-hunting buffalo, each knowing her role, each committed to seeing it through to the bloody end. Genzi's death was slower than Bomani's, more painful and infinitely more personal. When it was over, Nyota stood in the ravine surrounded by the evidence of her growing war, her amber eyes reflecting a satisfaction that was both terrifying and absolute. 2 down, 2 to go. The Savannah was beginning to whisper of strange happenings in the Acacia Ridge territory. Rangers reported unusual coalition behavior, with surviving males rarely seen apart, their movements erratic and paranoid. Other prides began to avoid the borders, sensing an instability that went beyond normal territorial disputes. Something was unraveling in what had once been a model of leonine dominance, and the tremors were spreading across the entire ecosystem. Kissi and Tau now moved through their territory like wounded elephants, dangerous in their desperation but fatally compromised by their losses. The once mighty coalition that had swept through the Acacia Ridge like wildfire was reduced to a pair of increasingly paranoid rulers who jumped at shadows and saw enemies in every rustling blade of grass. Their confidence had evaporated like morning mist, replaced by a gnawing fear that ate at their souls with each passing night. The transformation in their behavior was remarkable to witness. Where they had once patrolled with the swagger of conquerors, they now skulked through their own territory like trespassers. Every watering hole became a potential ambush site. Every grove of trees concealed imagined threats. They began sleeping in shifts, never allowing both to rest simultaneously, their yellow eyes constantly scanning the horizon for dangers that might or might not exist. Nyota watched their deterioration with the cold satisfaction of a predator savoring the slow death of wounded prey. She had not merely killed 2 of their number, she had shattered their psychological foundation, transforming kings into frightened refugees in their own kingdom. The other lionesses noticed the change too, and with each passing day, the balance of power shifted further toward the brewing rebellion. The third phase of Nyota's campaign required patience beyond what any normal lioness possessed. She needed Kezi and Tau to make mistakes, to expose themselves in ways that would allow her to finish what she had started. But cornered animals are often the most dangerous, and she knew that desperation might drive them to acts of violence that would endanger the remaining Pride members. Her solution was elegant in its simplicity. Rather than striking directly at the surviving males, she began to dismantle the very foundation of their rule. Territory markers were deliberately obscured during hunting expeditions. Scent posts were contaminated with the markings of rival prides, creating the impression that their borders were under constant assault. Key watering holes were temporarily abandoned, forcing the pride to seek water in areas where the male's protective presence was stretched thin. Each disruption was small, seemingly insignificant on its own, but together they created a cascade of instability that made effective leadership impossible. Kessie found himself racing from crisis to crisis, his massive frame showing signs of exhaustion as he tried to maintain control over a territory that seemed to be dissolving around him. Tao, younger but less experienced, made increasingly poor decisions under pressure, alienating lionesses who might have otherwise remained loyal. The psychological warfare extended beyond mere territory management. Nyota began orchestrating hunting failures that left the pride hungry, while simultaneously ensuring that her inner circle of conspirators always had access to food. The message was subtle but unmistakable. Under the old regime, all lionesses shared in the pride's prosperity. Under the new order, only those who served the rebellion thrived. As the dry season intensified, water became the ultimate weapon in Nyota's arsenal. She knew every source within 50 kilometers, knowledge acquired through years of territorial expansion under the previous coalition. When Kessie led hunting parties to the northern streams, Nyota would guide her allies to hidden springs in the south. When Tao claimed the main watering hole for the pride, alternative sources mysteriously appeared accessible to those who knew where to look. The effect on pride dynamics was devastating. Lionesses who had grudgingly accepted the new male's rule began to question their leadership openly. Cubs went hungry, while the males gorged themselves on kills they had not earned. The coalition's inability to provide basic security became apparent to even the most submissive pride members, and whispers of discontent grew into open criticism. During this period, Nyota's transformation into something beyond ordinary lioness behavior became complete. She moved through the territory like a shadow given purpose. Her presence felt even when she could not be seen. Other predators began to recognize her scent and actively avoid areas where she hunted. Hyenas that had once challenged lone lionesses now fled at her approach, sensing something in her that spoke of violence without mercy. The fourth phase of her revenge required allies beyond the pride's borders. And here, Nyota's earlier investments in interspecies diplomacy paid dividends. The hyena clans remembered her generosity during the abundant times and now repaid the debt with strategic harassment of the remaining males. Wild dogs coordinated their movements to create confusion along the territory's edges, forcing Kessie and Tao to respond to threats that vanished like smoke whenever they arrived. Thus ended the reign of those who believed power could be taken without consequence. Nyota's calculated vengeance became legend across the Masai Mara, a reminder that betrayal leaves wounds deeper than claws can reach. In the wild, justice wears no crown, but it carries teeth sharper than any sword. The Savannah remembers everything, and some debts can only be paid in blood.